message arrived while I was sitting in a hospital parking garage, engine off, hands still on the steering wheel. I'd been there for 10 minutes already, staring at nothing, trying to convince myself to go inside. My father was on the fourth floor, oncology wing, hooked to machines that hum like insects. Stage 3, aggressive, the kind of diagnosis that rearranges time. My phone buzzed. From my wife. I smiled at first. Reflex, habit, then I read it. I need to tell you something before you hear it from someone else. That sentence should come with a warning label. Her name was Claire. We'd been married 12 years. High school sweethearts who somehow survived college, early careers, and the quiet disappointments that settle into long relationships like dust you stop noticing. We lived in a suburb outside Minneapolis. Tree-lined streets, good schools, neighbors who shoveled each other's driveways in winter. We didn't have kids. Not yet, had turned into maybe someday, and then into silence. What's going on? I typed back. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I slept with your boss. I didn't feel anything at first. Not shock, not anger. Just a strange lightness, like gravity had loosened its grip. My boss, Daniel Foster, 46, married, 2 kids. Man who'd shaken my hand when I was promoted. Man who'd praised my integrity in meetings. Man who'd sent me home early once when my father had his first biopsy. I read the message again and again. I'm so sorry, she followed up. It wasn't planned. It just happened. That phrase, it just happened, as if people trip and fall into beds, as if betrayal is an accident. I didn't reply. I sat there while the parking garage echoed with footsteps and car doors and distant sirens. The world kept moving. Somewhere upstairs, my father was fighting for his life, and my wife had just detonated mine in a sentence. I finally typed, "When?" Another pause. "While you were in Chicago last month. For the conference." I remembered that trip. 3 nights, cheap hotel, takeout dinners eaten alone, late calls with Claire where she sounded distracted, said she was tired, said work was stressful. I'd told her I loved her before falling asleep each night. She'd said it back. I believed her. "Does he know you told me?" I asked. "No." "Does he know you're pregnant?" That took longer. Yes. There it was. The thing she hadn't led with. The real reason for the message. I put the phone down and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I laughed once, quietly, because the absurdity of it almost demanded it. My father was dying. My marriage was already dead. And my career was about to be complicated in ways no HR manual prepares you for. I went inside the hospital, sat with my father, held his hand while he slept, watched the slow rise and fall of his chest. I didn't tell him anything. He didn't need that weight. Some truths aren't meant to be shared. Not yet. That night I went home. Claire was waiting at the kitchen table, hands folded, eyes red, a box of tissues between us like a prop. She stood when she saw me. "I'm so sorry," she said again. "I never meant to hurt you." I set my keys down carefully. "Are you in love with him?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked down. "I don't know." That was answer enough. "And the baby?" I asked. "Do you know for sure?" She nodded. "We did the test." The air felt thin. "So you cheated, got pregnant, confirmed it wasn't mine, and only told me because it was going to come out anyway." She flinched. "That's not fair." I almost admired her nerve. "Are you planning to leave?" she asked. I looked at her then, really looked. 12 years condensed into a woman sitting across from me, waiting to see what she'd be allowed to keep. "No," I said, her eyes widened. "No? I'm not leaving," I repeated. Relief rushed over her face so fast she didn't even try to hide it. She stood and reached for me. I stepped back. "This doesn't mean what you think it means," I said. She froze. "I need time," I continued. "My father is sick. I'm not making any big decisions right now." She nodded quickly. Too quickly. "Of course. Take all the time you need." That night she slept in our bed. I slept on the couch. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the house breathe. And somewhere between midnight and morning, something inside me recalibrated. I wasn't angry yet. I was observant. Over the next weeks, I watched Claire carefully, how she checked her phone, how she avoided saying Daniel's name, how she framed the situation as something unfortunate rather than unforgivable. She talked about co-parenting options, about what was best for everyone. She spoke as if the mess had simply appeared and now adults needed to clean it up. Daniel, meanwhile, treated me exactly the same at work. Same tone, same meetings, same praise. If anything, he was kinder, more considerate. He'd stop by my desk to ask how my father was doing. He'd clap me on the shoulder and say things like, "Family comes first." I nodded, smiled, thanked him. He had no idea how much information people give away when they believe you're harmless. I didn't confront him. I didn't hint. I didn't warn. Instead, I started preparing, quietly, methodically. Because if there's one thing I learned working under Daniel Foster, it's that the most dangerous failures aren't loud. They're procedural. They unfold exactly as designed. The first rule I gave myself was simple. Don't rush the ending. People destroy themselves faster when they believe they're safe. Daniel and Claire both thought the danger had passed the moment I said I wasn't leaving. In their minds, that was the hardest obstacle cleared. Everything after that was just logistics. They were wrong. My father's condition declined slowly, painfully. Chemo drained him. The man who used to fix engines and argue about politics with anyone who'd listen now struggled to lift a cup of water. I spent evenings at the hospital, nights on the couch, mornings pretending to be functional at work. Daniel encouraged me to take time off. He framed it as generosity. I accepted every offer. I wanted him comfortable, confident. I wanted him to feel like he was being decent. Claire started attending doctor appointments alone. She didn't ask me to come. I think part of her was afraid of what seeing the baby on a screen would do to me. Another part was already rehearsing a future where I wasn't central anymore. She talked more openly now about arrangements, Daniel's divorce timeline, how complicated things were on his end, how patient she was being. I listened, asked questions, took mental notes. At work, Daniel trusted me completely. That was his mistake. He looped me into projects he normally would have kept tighter, asked me to handle reports, compliance documentation, vendor audits. He liked efficiency. He liked delegating to people he believed were loyal. I was very loyal, to process, to accuracy, to records. I noticed discrepancies, small ones at first, expenses categorized loosely, vendor relationships that blurred ethical lines. Nothing explosive on its own, but patterns emerge when you stop looking at events and start looking at behavior. Daniel cut corners, not illegally, not outright. He just bent rules when it benefited him. He assumed no one would ever connect the dots. That assumption rested heavily on the belief that the people closest to him would never turn into observers. I became very good at observing. I never saved anything on my work computer. Never emailed myself files. Never did anything traceable. I documented by memory first, then by copy in places that weren't obviously connected to me. Redundancy without fingerprints. The kind of habits you pick up when you understand systems better than people. Claire's pregnancy advanced. She glowed in public, complained in private. Hormones, fear, anticipation. Sometimes guilt would flicker across her face when she looked at me too long. She never apologized again. Confession to her was a one-time transaction. One night, about 2 months in, she asked me a question that told me everything I needed to know. "If Daniel leaves his wife," she said carefully, "would you be willing to move out? Not divorce, not separation. Move out, like rearranging furniture." I set my fork down. Eventually, I said, "Why?" She exhaled, relieved. "I just want things to be peaceful." Peaceful, another word people use when they mean convenient. My father died 3 weeks later. He went quietly, early morning, while I was holding his hand. I felt something crack then. Not violently, just enough to let something colder through. Grief stripped away the last layer of hesitation I didn't know I was still carrying. After the funeral, people hugged me and told me how strong I was, how composed, how proud my father would be. Daniel stood beside Claire the entire service, not touching her, not openly, just close enough to signal belonging. He shook my hand afterward and said, "If you need anything, anything at all." "I know," I said. "Thank you." That was the day I finalized the sequence. A week later, Daniel called a meeting with HR and senior leadership. I was invited. So was an external auditor. That was unusual. Daniel didn't like surprises. The fact that he'd allowed one told me he believed he had nothing to hide. He was wrong. The audit wasn't my doing. Not directly. All I'd done was ask the right questions in the right order to the right people. Months earlier, while wearing the mask of a concerned employee trying to help the company avoid risk. Once questions exist, they don't disappear. They escalate, quietly. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Daniel spoke less as it went on. His voice tightened. His confidence drained in increments so small only someone watching carefully would notice. By the end, HR asked him to step out of the room. He didn't look at me as he left. He was placed on administrative leave that afternoon. Claire found out before he did. Someone at the office texted her. She came home frantic, pale, pacing the kitchen. "Did you know about this?" she demanded. I looked up from the table. "About what?" "Daniel, he's in trouble. Serious trouble." I tilted my head. "I thought you said he was careful." She stared at me, really stared. For the first time, suspicion broke through panic. "What did you do?" I stood slowly, walked to the sink, rinsed my glass, took my time. "I did my job," I said. "You should try it sometime." Her mouth opened, closed. Her hand went to her stomach reflexively. "You wouldn't," she said. "You wouldn't do this." I met her eyes, calm, steady. "I didn't do anything," I said truthfully. "I just stopped protecting people who didn't deserve it." Daniel was terminated 2 weeks later, cause undisclosed. Reputation intact on paper, but internally poisoned. The kind of firing that follows you quietly for the rest of your career. His wife filed for divorce within days. Someone had told her everything. I didn't ask who. Claire cried when she found out. Not for me, not for the marriage. For the future she'd been constructing so carefully, collapsing all at once. "You ruined everything," she said one night, voice breaking. I nodded. "You ruined it first." She moved out a month before the baby was born. Not with Daniel. That option vanished quickly. She went to her sister's place. Lawyers replaced conversations. Silence replaced excuses. I stayed in the house until it sold. I packed only what I wanted, left the rest behind. When the final paperwork was signed, I felt lighter than I had in years. I heard later that Daniel tried to rebuild. New city, new role, less power, more scrutiny. He never fully recovered. Claire became a single mother with shared custody arrangements and a story she told herself to sleep at night. As for me, I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Some people mistake revenge for cruelty. They imagine screaming, humiliation, destruction. But the most effective revenge doesn't require rage. It requires patience and the willingness to let people live inside the consequences of their own choices without you standing in the way.